Good evening, and thank you for having me here tonight. Many of you might remember my brother Dow. He shared his version of our family story at the ACE annual luncheon 2 years ago. Seeing that I've always had better grades than Dow all throughout school, I thought it would be best to share my version of our family story. As many of you know, we are from a beautiful but troubled part of the world, East Africa, in what is now South Sudan. During decades of civil war, millions of Sudanese died from violence, starvation, and drought. As the conflict grew more intense in our hometown, we feared for our survival. Perhaps you remember what happens next. We packed what we had and risked everything to set out on a long, strenuous journey to Kenya. Dow was 8 at the time, and the oldest of us 5 children had to grow up too fast. And I, just a toddler, can recall my earliest childhood memories of fearfully walking for hours and days on end. My mom, a single mother, adopted my 3 cousins, and together we fled our hometown to walk over 100 miles, mostly at night. This is what I remember most, just walking and walking, and the aching feet, and more walking, until we arrived at a United Nations camp. Eventually, we were evacuated to Africa's second largest refugee camp, located in northern Kenya. We lived among over 2,000 other displaced people for 6 years. We were safe from war, but like most refugee camps, it was an unstable environment, and it had its own set of challenges. No one wanted to call it home. Everyone wanted a safe place to escape to. Most of all, everyone desperately wanted to create stability for their own family. Each day, children would go to a building in the camp to learn basic lessons in math, some English. But with so many children, little learning was taking place, and the chaos overwhelmed me. To this day, I remember crying for my mother at the schoolhouse. I can't imagine how she felt during this time. Fortunately, in 2005, our lives drastically changed. After years of trying, our application for asylum to America was approved, and we boarded a plane to the United States. We landed in New York City, and I vividly remember seeing lots of white snow, and to be honest, lots of white people, which I was not accustomed to. And with the mind of a child, I remember wondering if the snow would actually turn me white. There was a wave of relief as we gained passage to America. First New York, and then Denver. We had made it. But this was just the beginning. Despite our excitement to start a new life in America, the transition was difficult. My mother was taking care of 5 children, trying to find work and a place for us to call home. No one in my family had ever received a formal education, and none of us knew English. I was placed in English as a secondary language class in a Denver public school. Think about this scenario. I was nearly 8 years old, and I had to be enrolled into kindergarten. We were living in an increasingly violent neighborhood. A neighbor in our apartment complex was killed, and my mother had enough. She had moved us to America to get away from violence. Desperate to protect us and to provide us with the education she never had, my mom felt that a smaller school would support us socially and academically. We moved again, this time to Commerce City, where many other Sudanese refugees were living. Other parents told my mom about a local private school whose student population also had children whose families were refugees. She walked into Annunciation and knew this would be a safe place for me. The only thing standing between my mom's relief and rejoice was the cost of tuition. She was working 2 janitorial jobs, and for all of her and tuition for all of her children was far out of reach. That was until by fate, the school presented my mom with an ACE scholarship application. The scholarship didn't cover the entire cost, but it was enough to make up for the rest. For the first time since leaving our home in South Sudan, my mother's spirits were lifted and our lives would be forever changed. Can you imagine that? That day, my mom learned all 5 of us would attend private school. At 8 years old, I began my educational journey at Annunciation. And for the first time in America, I saw other kids that looked like me. My early feelings about my learning experience transformed from daunting, overwhelming, to positive and exciting. Elementary school at Annunciation is where I developed some fantastic relationships with my teachers. They taught me to gain confidence, to speak with my peers, and to discover a love of reading. I entered middle school and noticed a fascination with history and studying other cultures. Now, I recognize what a pivotal point that was in my life because I realized my upbringing was not normal. I became sad and angry because I learned I was different. Suddenly, I didn't feel like a kid anymore and grew upset because I had grown up so fast. I became angry and grew irritable and didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. If it weren't for those same teachers, once again, that guided me to the essentials of speaking, reading, writing, and now choosing to care and actually teach me about the beauty of my lineage, I would not be standing before you today. And again, with better grades than my brother now. Rather than ignoring my behavior, my teachers were concerned. They talked to me and tried to find ways to relate. The beauty of these relationships is that they helped me overcome my sadness, but more importantly, they helped me rationalize and understand my past and what my future could be. Essentially, they made me stronger by using the strife I had been through to define how I could succeed. They gave me books to read about African history. They helped me research the development of East Africa, why the war happened, and about current social injustices. Ultimately, they helped me understand my childhood and why it was the way it was. This was the first time I was able to fully comprehend the values of a private education. My private school teachers knew education was meant to inform, to empower, and to help us better understand who we are and who we could be. My education was not only about academics, it was about character. My teachers continued to go above and beyond to prepare me for my next steps. They let me books, challenged me to get involved, and instilled a focus on serving my own community. I began to notice the difference between my experience and the kids in my neighborhood. I was hanging out with some of the girls on my street, and one said, "Don't go to school, that's dumb, what's the point?" I was defensive and upset because I took pride in my accomplishments. I told them, "No, I must go to school. I need to go to school." I used this as motivation. During high school at Arupe Jesuit, I believed every one of my peers would go on to have bright futures, and it was expected of me to do the same. If I had not received my ACE scholarship, I would not have learned English as quickly, been encouraged socially, or believed in my own future. Along with that, I would not have dreamed of college. I would not have applied or even considered higher education. But in the spring of my senior year, after a decade of frustration, hard work, and determination, I received notice that I was accepted into the University of Notre Dame. Tears of joy and excitement didn't stop there. The very same day, I got a letter in the mail that told me that I had been awarded the Daniel Fund Scholarship to the university of my choice for all 4 years. And on that day, I knew I was capable of doing anything, a day I will never forget. My mom and I cried with tears of happiness, and my family was so proud of me. Now, I'm a sophomore at the University of Notre Dame, majoring in political science and history with a minor in Africana studies. My teachers had such a positive influence while encouraging me to pursue African history during my formative years. I now want to give back by attending law school and ultimately work to give others equal opportunity in regards to education. Last year, I started a Notre Dame chapter of the global nonprofit Education Bridge. Education Bridge builds and operates schools that focus on helping students develop peace-building skills. As president, members and I raise money and awareness for secondary education in South Sudan, my native country. Through this work and research with professors at Notre Dame, I hope to spend my postgraduate years in Uganda studying the experience and development of various refugee groups from all over East Africa. Westerners love to say that it takes a village to raise a child. This truly was the case for our family. My mom needed help. My siblings and I needed attention, encouragement, and confidence. We all needed the safety of a supportive community. I like to say that if I had a grandmother out here, it would be Ace, because they gave us a chance in the community we desperately needed. It was the hope my mother yearned for, the opportunity we never had, and the future we always wanted. I am dedicating my life to bridging the international education gap. And believe me, I have the determination and the grit to do it. I do everything I do for those who cannot leave and receive this type of education. I firmly believe that I am learning for them too. Okay. Thank you for believing in education. Thank you for giving my mother, a family, and a young girl from East Africa a chance. Thank you. Good.